All right, hey guys, I'm Sean.
And I'm Cal. And we did predicting medical appointment no-shows. So our business problem objective is minimizing the missed doctor's appointment. 20% of patients are no-shows for appointments. And so we wanted to try to figure out why do certain patients not show up for their doctor's appointments, determine the financial impacts, discover actionable insights to help the office staff increase attendance rate, deploy a model and predict the probability of a patient missing the appointment, and then obviously recommend a solution to the office staff to increase the attendance rate. So questions to explore. Which patient's attributes impact the most no-show rates? Chronic health conditions, possibly. The patient's age or gender. Scheduling appointments, how far in advance? Is the patient handicapped or have alcoholism? Are the text messages that are sent to you guys before a doctor's appointment is effective? And what day of the week is the appointment? Our data set details. So we did a data source based on the Brazilian health records. In this data set, about 20% of the data set are no-shows. The appointments were spanned from April 29th, 2016 to June 8th, 2016. Our dependent variable was the no-shows, and yes for if the patient did not show up for the appointment, and no if the patient was able to attend. Number of records was just over 110,000, and there were 14 columns for this data set. Financial impact of the no-show. How much does a missed appointment actually cost the doctor's office? The data set based on the Brazil patient-doctor appointment data. Brazil has a public health system named Sistema Único de Saúde, and I apologize for my Portuguese, I only speak English. Brazil's average doctor appointment is 240 Brazilian real. With the exchange rate of 3.9, it comes up to $60 US. And also for the text messaging, we found out 75% of Brazilians actually own a mobile device. So our data exploration discovery, we decided to exclude our same-day walk-in appointments because obviously if you walk in, you're not going to miss the appointment. So we were able to exclude about just over 38,000 appointment records. And as you can see at this chart, you can see that for 0 days, only 4.7 people missed actually their appointment. So we decided to exclude that one.
All right, so here's our confusion matrix. So these are the different value amounts that we assign to each of the prediction types. So true, positive, and the point of deploying this model is for the office staff to be able to predict patients that are most likely to miss their appointment. So with this model, it allows the office staff to identify high-risk patients and follow up with them. So to give them a call, check in, are you, as a reminder, will you be attending your appointment? Do you need to reschedule? So with that said, being able to identify a high-risk potential patient gives office staff the ability to call and reschedule. A conservative estimate is that the office staff will be able to reschedule about 1/3 of patients that they call and contact. So the dollar amount that, after applying some pricing logic here, we're assuming that for a missed appointment, it'll cost the office about $30. So they'll lose out on about $30, factoring in that they'll be able to reschedule a portion of those patients. A false positive, we assigned a $50 value because, again, the total cost of the appointment would be about $60 revenue for the office, subtracting some additional cost associated with the office staff actually making those phone calls to try to reschedule. True negative, this is a patient who's predicted to come in and a patient who does come in. So the office would make on average $60. And then lastly, false negatives, these are patients that are predicted to attend that don't actually show up. So the office staff doesn't act on them. So they're losing out the full cost. So they're not given the chance to try to reschedule. So that's a negative $60. This is just a view of the original data set. So we have some patient identifiers, we have some patient details such as different conditions that they suffer from. We have our time elements, so when the appointment was scheduled, when it was the day that the actual appointment was for. And then I just highlighted our target variable, which is the no-show. So this is, did the patient miss their appointment? Yes. Or did they show up? No. And then these are some of the engineered features that we made from the data. So we just broke up the time to break it into day, month, and we also removed the time element because the raw data had a time element in there as well, which we just removed that. And then I highlighted a couple here that actually turned out to be pretty, that had a higher predictive value. The first one being the number of days ahead of time that the appointment's actually scheduled in advance. So if you schedule 10 days out or 5 days out or 2 days out, we create that variable. We also have an age group, so we bucketed the age into different kind of life stages. So things that logically made sense with where a patient may be in their different life stage. And then also a chronic condition flag. So if the patient had suffered from either hypertension or diabetes, so high blood pressure, diabetes, something that would require some type of maintenance, where you're most likely to be visiting the doctor's office semi-regularly, we created a flag for those patients as well. We built the models both in DataRobot and Azure. So from the DataRobot, these were some of the highest predictive fields. So the age groups, the bins that were created, they had some high predictive value. The number of days ahead of time that the appointment was scheduled for, the day the appointment was scheduled, the month that the appointment was scheduled, and the chronic condition flag, or it really kind of mostly related to hypertension, which we'll see in the visuals. So these were the best models from DataRobot. So we have the AVG blender and this support vector machine. Those were the two highest ranked. And after building the payoff estimate, the best one was the blender model, which also had the highest AUC. We built the same, we built models in Azure as well. And the best model here was the boosted decision tree, which same thing, had the highest payoff. So payoff is the metric that we used to determine the best model, which also pretty much tied out with the AUC. And just in case you catch this, the pricing is a little different because in hindsight, DataRobot kind of had a different number of predictors than Azure. So if you look at the dollar, amounts are kind of different. So this is just a recap of the best model for Azure, again, which was the boosted decision tree. All right, so some of the visuals from our top predictors. So one of the highest predictor variables was age group. And some of the key components, or the key insights that we got from here were that adolescents and young adults were the highest risks for no-shows. And another insight is that the older patients get, the lower their no-show rate is. So you think if you're a younger patient, you might not want to go for your doctor's checkup, or maybe you don't have money or insurance or whatever it might be, versus elderly patients. Probably as you get older, you're more likely to attend. You probably have more, health conditions or just health risks to consider. Another interesting thing is that the gender didn't really, in our analysis, didn't really have much predictive value, and the actual attendance rate was pretty similar across males and females. This is the chronic condition and hypertension variable. So the insight here is that if a patient has some type of a chronic condition that requires some type of maintenance and regular doctor visits, they're actually more likely to attend. So they have a lower no-show rate of about 24%, versus a patient that does not have a chronic condition. has a higher no-show rate of about 30%. And another variable that we found that had high predictive value was the number of days in advance that the appointment's scheduled. So for appointments that were scheduled about 1 to 10 days in advance, they had a lower no-show rate of about 25%. Anything above 10 days out shot up to about 32 or 33%. And if a patient suffers from alcoholism, they are more likely to miss their appointment. And then in terms of handicap, so the data actually had a couple different levels of severity. And really there weren't too many insights to draw there because there's really nothing that really jumps out to me there for handicap patients. For the text message reminder, so if a patient receives a text message, they are actually slightly more likely to attend their appointment. So patients that did not receive a text message reminder had about a 29% no-show versus patients that did receive had about 27 to 28. So that did show some lowering of the no-show rate. And then the last visual is the day of the week that the appointment is scheduled for. So the insights that we got from here are that appointments that are scheduled on Mondays or Fridays, patients are more likely to miss those appointments.
Insights we learned from the data. We found out that the patients with chronic conditions have a higher probability of attending their appointments. People with diabetes is a very focused one. We realized that adolescents and young adults are more likely to miss their appointments. I believe that we have data that shows that if a 60-year-old sprains their ankle and a 20-year-old sprains their ankle, the 20-year-old is definitely going to heal a lot faster than a 60-year-old person. Also, as we discussed before, maybe they don't have as large of an income, so they don't want to pay for the doctor's appointment in itself. Patients with alcoholism, as is, alcoholism affects people in different ways where they might not be as reliable as someone that doesn't suffer from the disease. The further in advance the appointment is scheduled, the higher no-show rate. I'm sure if your friend asks you for July weekend, hey, let's go to the beach on Friday, the last thing you're thinking about is showing up to a doctor's appointment instead. We found out Monday and Friday appointments have the highest no-show rate. Sometimes people want to extend their weekend a little bit and they won't bother going to their doctor's appointment. Actionable insights. So this is what we would like to recommend to the office. More text messages, phone, and letter reminders. We know that the text messages decrease the no-show rate by 2%. It's a $150 billion no-show rate in the U.S. That's what the cost is. So even though 2% doesn't seem like a lot, $3 billion is a lot. Schedule appointments as near in the future as possible. When you have someone coming back in for a check-in, try to schedule it 2 weeks in advance instead of a full month. You want to follow up with the adults and the adolescents. See if that sprained ankle is cured and they don't want to come back in early. So you can maybe schedule someone else to get that appointment and not lose that opportunity cost. And then also I would develop strong relationships with elderly patients. I know my grandma, when she has to wait for anything over 5 minutes, she gets very irritated. So I'll keep the wait times to a minimum. Back to my grandma, offer a prepaid incentive. She'll be all right with paying a little bit out just so she could, so they apply for the attendance. And then be sure to thank the parents. My grandma, again, she likes when I have good manners. If you say thank you, she's more likely to come back to the doctors. Any questions? So everything was perfect? Thank you.